My neighbor started sending disturbing messages. They had moved into the neighborhood a few months ago and never left the house during the day. Every night at 9:54 p.m., I would hear a car engine start, and in the morning, the car would be back in the driveway. I thought they were working night shifts. One night, while watching Miami Vice, I got up to make popcorn and heard the engine running. Curious, I opened my window and looked outside. I saw my neighbor carrying a large black trash bag in their driveway. This was unusual. I watched them open the trunk and throw the bag inside. I pulled my head back inside, heart pounding, and considered calling 911, but I wasn't sure if a crime had been committed. The next morning, the car was gone, which made things even more suspicious. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "If you tell anyone what you saw, I'll kill you." I was paralyzed with fear and immediately blocked the number. How did they get my number? It had to be my neighbor. I tried to calm myself and get ready for work. The day passed without incident, but I was scared to go home. I called my friend Melanie and asked if I could stay at her place for the night. When I arrived at Melanie's, she was happy to see me, but quickly noticed something was wrong. I didn't want to worry her, so I put my things in her spare bedroom. My phone buzzed again with a message from an unknown number. "You can't escape me. I won't let you." I convinced Melanie to let me stay longer and eventually told her everything. She was understanding and allowed me to stay as long as I needed. She helped me pack my things and move them to her place. She also took security measures, installing cameras, alarms, and sensors. I felt safer, but still a bit paranoid. With my new phone and number, I stopped receiving messages. One day, Melanie went out for a girls' night with her colleagues, leaving me home alone. She said she'd be back before midnight. After she left, I grabbed a snack and went to my room to watch Miami Vice. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from an unknown number. "I know you're there. I know you're hiding from me." Terrified, I walked to the window and slightly pulled back the curtain. Across the street, a lone figure in a hoodie stood with their hands in their pockets. I immediately dialed Melanie's number, but it went to voicemail. Panic set in. I turned off the TV and checked all the locks. My phone buzzed again. "Okay, if you're not coming out, I'm coming in." I tried calling Melanie again, but it went to voicemail. Feeling desperate, I dialed 911 and explained the situation. The operator assured me that help was on the way. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. Adrenaline pumping, I cautiously approached the front door. The doorknob slowly turned. I pressed my weight against the door, but it shook violently as if being rammed. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. "Do you hear that? They're coming for you. You won't get away with this. I hope you rot in jail," I shouted. Shouting voices surrounded the house. I ran to a window and saw multiple police officers with their guns drawn. Shots were fired. I saw the figure attempting to flee, but then falling to the ground, hit. I thought they had killed my neighbor. Moments later, there was a knock at the door. I froze, but it was one of the officers. "It's safe to come out now. He's dead. He won't harm you anymore." I stepped into the cold night. My neighbor's lifeless body was being carried on a stretcher. The police asked questions, but I was too numb to respond. I just stared into the distance. It was finally over. After that night, I developed PTSD. I was never the same. I fell into a deep depression and became more paranoid than ever. Melanie insisted I see a therapist, but I kept postponing it. I barely left my room and even considered ending my life. After weeks of misery, I finally found the courage to seek real help. Slowly, my mental health improved, and I became less paranoid. An investigation into my neighbor's house revealed that they had been on a killing spree across the county. They had bodies hidden in their basement and would dispose of them at random locations during the night. If it hadn't been for me, they would have continued their murders. This experience taught me a harsh lesson. You can never truly know who your neighbors are. I recently moved into a new apartment in a quiet neighborhood somewhere in the Philippines, and I think I'm the only one that noticed something extremely wrong with the old lady living next to me. Let's call her Linda. I sometimes see her during the day, watering plants on her little porch, getting the mail, or her simply sitting outside getting some sun. From what I heard, she's a retired nurse that worked in one of the asylums from back in the day. She also lived alone for a couple of years now after her husband passed back in the 90s. We exchanged a few friendly highs and hellos a couple of times, and everything was good for a while. One time she gave me pasta. It tasted weird. I would always hear her record player playing old songs during afternoons. Linda was around 65 years old, had graying hair and a sweet smile on her lips every time you talked to her. She had this grandmotherly vibe to her. I liked that since I lost my grandma at a very young age. But we never really became close. She was sort of distant and kept to herself. Fast forward to a couple of months since moving in. I worked late shifts and would usually come home at around 12 a.m. That's when the strange things started occurring. As I was opening the gate to my apartment, I felt like I was being watched. You know that feeling in the back of your neck and your spine just tingling out of nowhere. I glanced at Linda's house a couple of times after noticing all the lights were off. Odd. She usually left the front porch lights on through the night out of habit, but this was nothing to be alerted by. Maybe she simply forgot. But after a couple of nights like this, that feeling of being watched never left me. One night, I finally took a closer look into the darkness of her house and noticed someone sitting on her porch, just barely visible through the darkness. It was her. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I could make out the shape of her body. Thin, hair down, hunched over on a chair, not moving. She was facing my direction. I was sure of that. I was also sure that she was the one watching me these past few nights. I waved to her. No response. I shrugged it off. Tired from work, I didn't have time and energy to stress over what my neighbors were up to. But what could she be doing outside at 12 a.m.? I didn't think of these things back then, but it was certainly odd looking back. The next morning, I saw her outside talking to another neighbor, just the usual. At a distance, she looked at my direction and smiled. I smiled back, but there was something about her face, something out of order, something very odd. When I was a kid, I remember my little sister having these stuffed toy dolls with faces just painted on them. It was like that with Linda. It was almost like her face was just painted on, and that there was nothing underneath those lines. It was subtle, but under the sun, it was almost uncanny. And her smile, something about her smile that told me she knew I saw her the other night. It was terrifying. I left to go see my mom over brunch and told her about the whole Linda situation. My mom jokingly told me about an urban legend back in her province of an aswang that steals people's faces. This creature was said to know when someone was about to die and would steal their faces to use in committing terrifying acts. Using charcoal, the creature would then doodle a new face on. I laughed at the idea and forgot about the entire thing. Everything went back to normal after that. Linda and I had exchanged a few words through the next few months. One afternoon, she asked me if her record player was too loud, and I said no. She even gave me an old pocket watch with a mirror on the other side of it. A pocket mirror and watch, she told me. It was supposed to be her husband's, as she was trying to get rid of some of his things. But that was all. She went back to being distant, and I went on with life. It was in December on that same year when I saw what I would describe as the scariest thing I've ever seen in my adult life. It was about 1 a.m. on a work week, and I was just getting home from a tiring day when I felt it again, that eerie feeling of being watched. Her house was blacked out again, and suddenly all those odd things about Linda started to fill my mind again. I froze in place. She was there, or it was there. I could make out the shape of her body on the porch. She was standing this time. Her hair was down, moving in the wind. It was starting to rain, and I was starting to get cold and shivering. I tried to find the courage to shine my phone's flashlight in her direction, but I was too scared of what it may uncover. Then, I heard this very soft cry, a cry that you may hear from someone covering their mouth. I jumped and shined my flashlight in her direction. There was Linda, or what was once Linda, facing me. She wore a night sweater of some sort. She was very thin, and hair messed up from the wind. I screamed. Whatever it was standing in front of me wasn't Linda. She had no face. What was once the face of the neighbor I knew was gone. It was as if someone had taken it off. It was just pale white skin as a face. I could hear this soft cry again as she tried to talk with no mouth. She started to lift one of her hands as if gesturing me to come over. I almost fainted. I never thought I could start my motorcycle as fast as I did, but I sped out of there and into the rainy night towards my mom's house. I never told anyone about what happened that night, and I managed to move out of the apartment the next week. To hell with my security deposit. I also never saw Linda again. I tried my best to bury that memory for so long. All of this happened about 20 years ago, and I never told anyone until now. I never really did find out what exactly happened to Linda, my old neighbor, but I sometimes asked around. Some say she passed away the following year. Some say she moved to live with her brother, but left all her things behind, even her record player. It was like she just disappeared. But all this time, I kept the pocket mirror watch she gave me. I sometimes look at myself in that small mirror and think about why my face sometimes looks like it's just painted on.